Have you ever wondered why the person who hurt you the most still has such a powerful grip on your heart? Even after all the pain, the silence, the broken promises, something inside you keeps holding on. Maybe it's love. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's just the hope that somehow, someday, things will go back to how they used to be. But deep down, in the quiet moments when no one is watching, you feel it. That ache in your chest, the weight in your stomach, the voice in your head that whispers, "This is destroying me." You're not weak for feeling this way. You're not broken because you can't let go. You're human. And being human means feeling deeply, sometimes more than is good for us. We form attachments because we crave connection, safety, and belonging. We give our time, our energy, our love, often without asking if it's being returned in the same way. We build dreams around someone's presence, and when they begin to fade, we don't just lose a person, we lose a part of ourselves. That's the real pain, isn't it? Not just losing them, but losing you, losing your smile, your peace, your sleep, your ability to think clearly, laugh freely, or plan for your future without wondering where they fit into it. Emotional attachment is powerful because it's rooted in your identity. You didn't just love them, you built something with them, even if only in your mind. And tearing that down feels like tearing yourself apart. But what if holding on is what's keeping you stuck? What if the very thing you're clinging to is what's drowning you? There comes a moment, a painful, honest, courageous moment, when you realize that continuing to hold on is no longer love. It's survival. It's fear of emptiness. It's fear of what life looks like without that emotional anchor, even if that anchor is pulling you under. And in that moment, you're faced with a choice: continue to suffer in the comfort of the familiar, or rise into the discomfort of freedom. This is not just about detachment. It's about rediscovering your power. The power to take your heart back, to protect your peace, to stop bleeding for someone who doesn't even notice you're hurting. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't care. It means you're finally starting to care about yourself. And that shift, that decision, changes everything. If you've been searching for a sign, this is it. Not because someone else said so, but because your soul is tired, and you're ready. You're ready to stop surviving and start healing. You're ready to breathe again without carrying someone else's weight on your chest. And if you stay with me through this journey, you'll learn the exact steps to break free. You'll discover 9 powerful rules that can help you detach, reclaim your peace, and rise stronger than ever. It starts now. Your healing begins here. You stayed because you believed. You believed they would change. You believed things would get better. You believed love alone would be enough to fix it. And that belief became your prison. It kept you loyal to someone who made you feel invisible. It kept you fighting for a future that never came. It kept you shrinking to fit into a space you were never meant to stay in, and still you gave more. You gave when it hurt. You gave when it broke you. You gave until there was almost nothing left of you to give. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength that nearly kills you. But here's what no one tells you. The same heart that held on that long is the same heart strong enough to let go. You're not broken because you're struggling. You're not failing because your emotions are all over the place. Your mind might understand what's happening, but your heart hasn't caught up yet. That's because detachment isn't just a decision. It's a process. It's not about flipping a switch. It's about peeling back the layers of emotional dependency, one painful truth at a time. You became attached because your heart found something that felt safe, familiar, or exciting. Maybe it reminded you of love you never had. Maybe it gave you meaning in a time you felt lost. That's real. That's valid. But just because something felt right at one time doesn't mean it still belongs in your life now. People grow, people change, and sometimes the hardest truth to accept is that not everyone is meant to stay. Not everyone who enters your life is meant to go with you to the next chapter. Some people are here to teach you what love isn't, what self-worth looks like when it's been ignored, what boundaries sound like when they've been crossed too many times. You don't owe anyone your continued pain. You don't owe anyone access to your mind, your body, your emotions, especially if they've proven they can't protect them. This is where your healing begins, not in blaming them, but in taking your power back from them. Every time you catch yourself reminiscing, pause and ask, what did this cost me? Not to dwell in bitterness, but to remember the price of ignoring your peace. You cannot heal in the same environment that broke you. You cannot move forward while dragging dead weight from the past. Letting go doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you start loving yourself more. Enough to stop settling. Enough to stop chasing. Enough to stop waiting for someone else to give you what you were always meant to give yourself. Respect, peace, freedom. The life you deserve will never begin while you're still emotionally tied to the one who couldn't see your value. You already know this. You've just been waiting for permission. But the truth is, you don't need it. The only permission you've ever needed is your own. The most dangerous attachment is the one built on potential. You didn't fall for who they are now. You fell for who you hoped they would become. You saw glimpses, promises, flashes of something more, and you held on because you believed that version of them would one day show up for you. But they didn't. And with every day you waited, you lost more of yourself to a future that never arrived. Emotional detachment begins when you stop waiting for the fantasy and face the reality. Because love built on illusion will always leave you empty. Facing the truth hurts, but denial hurts longer. You can't keep painting red flags white. You can't keep romanticizing inconsistency and calling it passion. Real connection doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't make you beg for time, attention, or basic respect. If you constantly feel anxious, unsure, or unloved, that is not love. That is emotional captivity. And you were not born to live chained to someone else's inability to love you properly. The truth is, we don't just become attached to people. We become attached to how they made us feel at our most vulnerable. Maybe they showed up during a hard time. Maybe they made you feel seen when no one else did. That memory becomes a comfort, a justification for staying. But memories are not a reason to stay stuck in cycles that only hurt you. You're not obligated to hold on to someone just because they were there once. People can be important in your story and still not deserve a permanent place in your life. Detachment is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. Clear about what you want, clear about what you deserve, clear about what is no longer healthy for your heart. It's recognizing that you've been trying to carry a connection that was never mutual, and it's breaking your back. No more twisting yourself into someone else's version of lovable. No more shrinking so someone else can feel big. You are allowed to walk away from what no longer grows you, even if it once felt like home. There is freedom in releasing what was never meant to stay. There is peace in no longer fighting for someone to choose you. The moment you stop chasing their potential, you begin reclaiming your power. You begin waking up without anxiety in your chest. You begin sleeping without questioning your worth. You begin living without dragging the weight of someone else's confusion through every corner of your mind. You don't detach because you've stopped caring. You detach because you've started healing. You detach to make space for what's real, what's healthy, what feeds your soul instead of draining it. And when you finally let go of the illusion, you make room for a truth far greater than anything you've been clinging to. You realize the person you've been waiting for might have always been you. There's a moment when you stop asking, "Why did they leave?" and start asking, "Why was I trying so hard to keep them?" That shift is where freedom begins. You look back and realize you were clinging to someone who couldn't see your value, who only showed up when it was easy, who left you questioning yourself more than they ever answered. And still, you loved them. You gave them grace, chances, explanations. You softened your voice. You buried your needs. You called it love. But real love doesn't require you to disappear just to keep someone else comfortable. You weren't too much. You were just too much for someone unwilling to grow. And now, it's time to stop internalizing their emotional immaturity as your failure. It's not your fault they couldn't show up. It's not your fault they chose silence over effort. What you're responsible for now is your healing, your peace, your ability to stand in your truth without shrinking to fit someone else's version of acceptable. The first step to emotional detachment is brutal honesty, not with them, with yourself. You have to tell yourself the truth you've been avoiding. They were not showing up for you. They were inconsistent, unavailable, or indifferent. And you kept rewriting that reality into a story where they cared, where they were just confused, where if you just loved harder, they would come around. That narrative kept you stuck. That hope, as beautiful as it was, kept you holding on long after it was time to let go. It's not about blaming them or hating them. It's about releasing yourself from the lie that you had to earn their love. You don't. You never did. The right love doesn't need to be chased. It doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It doesn't keep you in a cycle of confusion, wondering if today you'll be chosen or ignored. Detachment means stepping out of that loop. It means reclaiming the emotional space that has been consumed by someone who hasn't earned it. You've given enough. You've tried enough. You've cried enough. And now, it's time to rise. Not with anger, but with clarity. Not with bitterness, but with strength. You are not here to prove your worth to someone who refuses to see it. You are not here to be half-loved, almost chosen, or occasionally remembered. You are here to be whole, to be free, to finally feel peace without having to beg for it. Your heart has been loyal to the wrong places for too long. But loyalty doesn't mean staying where love isn't present. Loyalty also means being loyal to you, to your healing, your growth, your peace. Letting go isn't a sign that you've lost. It's a sign that you've finally remembered who you are. And from that moment forward, everything begins to change. The past no longer holds you. The pain no longer defines you. You're no longer waiting. You're walking forward, free. Detachment begins the moment you stop begging for clarity from someone who thrives on your confusion. You've spent so long trying to understand them, trying to make sense of their mixed signals, their hot and cold behavior, their sudden silence. You thought if you could just get answers, just hear the right words, maybe you could finally move on. But the truth is, closure is not something they give you. It's something you create when you finally accept that their silence is an answer, their inconsistency is a decision, and their behavior is all the clarity you'll ever need. You've been conditioned to believe that love should always hurt, that if it's hard, it must be real, that if you're suffering, it must be worth it. But pain is not a measure of love. It's a signal that something is wrong, and emotional detachment means listening to that signal instead of silencing it. It means honoring your pain instead of dismissing it. It means telling yourself the truth, even when it shatters the illusion you've been holding on to. There is nothing romantic about waiting to be chosen. There is no glory in loving someone who makes you feel like you're never enough. You are not put on this earth to audition for someone else's attention. You are not a placeholder for someone who is unsure. You are not a backup plan, an option, or a temporary fix for their loneliness. You are a whole person, deserving of love that is certain, present, and consistent. When you start detaching, your mind will resist. It will bring up every memory, every moment of warmth, every word that made you feel special. Your heart will ache not just for the person, but for the version of you that existed when you felt loved. That's normal. That's part of the process. But you must remind yourself, if love is real, it doesn't disappear. It doesn't make you question your worth. It doesn't leave you empty. What you had might have been real to you, but if it didn't nourish you, if it didn't grow you, if it didn't protect your soul, it's not something you need to keep chasing. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing yourself, over and over, even when the past calls you back. It means not answering. It means knowing that peace is more valuable than unfinished conversations, that your healing matters more than their explanations, that your future is worth more than their temporary presence. You've waited long enough. You've tried long enough. And now, it's your time. To release the weight, to trust yourself, to break the emotional chains you didn't deserve. The peace you've been searching for isn't found in their apology. It's found in your decision to let go, to breathe, to reclaim your life without waiting for anyone to give you permission. This is your breakthrough. This is the moment you rise. Healing begins when you stop giving your energy to what drains you. You've been pouring into someone who couldn't hold your love, who never gave you a safe place to rest your heart. And still, you kept showing up. You kept believing that if you just did more, gave more, waited longer, they would finally see you. But you were never the problem. Your love was not the problem. The problem was trying to bloom in soil that was never meant to grow anything real. And now, it's time to reclaim every part of you that forgot what it means to feel whole. You've been conditioned to attach your worth to how much someone needs you, to how much you can endure, to how well you can keep the peace in chaos. But peace kept through silence isn't peace. It's self-betrayal. And every time you let someone treat you like you're easy to leave, you teach your heart that it's okay to settle for less. That ends now. Because emotional detachment isn't about disconnecting from your emotions. It's about protecting them. It's about refusing to keep investing in people who leave you empty. The mind creates stories to protect what the heart doesn't want to let go of. But when the story becomes your prison, you have to choose truth over comfort. You have to face the reality you didn't want to admit, that someone you loved didn't show up, didn't stay, didn't give you what you gave them, and instead of continuing to fight for the idea of them, you choose to fight for yourself. That's where the power is, not in holding on, but in finally, fearlessly releasing what was never yours to carry. This is your time to stop chasing closure from people who ran from accountability, to stop needing validation from someone who couldn't even value your presence. You are not here to convince anyone of your worth. The ones who are meant for you will recognize it without needing to be reminded. Detachment gives you the space to see that clearly. It removes the fog of emotional confusion and brings you back to yourself, the self you lost while trying to make something broken feel whole. You owe it to yourself to choose differently, to choose peace over chaos, to choose healing over history, to choose your future over your fears. The love you deserve will not ask you to beg. It will not thrive in silence. It will not leave you wondering if you are enough. The love you deserve will feel like home in your own skin, not exile in someone else's life. Let this be your turning point. Let this be the moment you no longer allow pain to be your comfort zone. You are not what you lost. You are not what they couldn't give you. You are everything you've been looking for, steady, whole, worthy. And now, you rise from the ruins of false love into the strength of self-love. No longer waiting, no longer chasing. Free. You cannot heal in the same environment that broke you. You cannot grow while constantly reopening wounds to check if they still hurt. Detachment is not an escape from love. It's an act of self-respect. It's the quiet, powerful decision to stop feeding what starves your soul. You've already done the hardest part. You stayed, you tried, you believed. But now, it's time to do something even harder. It's time to choose yourself. Not just in theory, not just in moments of strength, but fully, completely, and unapologetically. Your energy is sacred. Your peace is not negotiable. You don't have to keep explaining why you're tired, why you're distant, why your heart feels heavy. You know the truth. You've been pouring yourself into someone who was never ready to hold what you gave. And while that truth may sting, it also sets you free. Because you no longer have to wait. You no longer have to wonder. You no longer have to shrink your needs just to keep a temporary bond alive. The emotional tie you feel isn't just about love. It's about familiarity. It's about habit. It's about the patterns you've created around their presence, the way your mind loops through every conversation, every missed chance, every what if. That loop is not love. That loop is programming. And it can be unlearned. You have the power to rewire what you give attention to. Every time you shift your focus from them back to yourself, you weaken that tie. Every time you honor your boundaries, every time you stop checking your phone, every time you choose peace over chaos, you are detaching, slowly but surely. You don't detach by pretending you don't care. You detach by caring so deeply about your mental and emotional well-being that you refuse to keep reliving the same pain. You detach by seeing the situation for what it is, not what you hoped it would become. That level of honesty is brutal, but it's the path to clarity. And clarity is freedom. Start small, one moment at a time, one thought at a time. Every time you resist the urge to reach out, to re-explain, to re-engage, you're taking your power back, not because you're cold, not because you've stopped feeling, but because you've started remembering that your life matters, your time matters, your heart deserves rest. You deserve softness, stability, kindness that doesn't come with confusion. You deserve love that doesn't have to be earned through pain. This isn't about winning. This isn't about proving anything. This is about peace. And you fought too many inner battles to keep losing sleep over someone who couldn't choose you in the daylight. So let go of the version of love that only taught you how to suffer. Let go of the bond that made you forget your worth. You are no longer available for what hurts you. You are no longer waiting to be saved. You are the one you've been waiting for. When you finally detach, you begin to see everything clearly. The silence that used to confuse you becomes evidence. The emotional distance you once tried to close becomes confirmation. All the excuses you made for their behavior no longer hold up under the weight of your truth. You stop searching for meaning in their chaos and start creating meaning in your own peace. Because detachment doesn't make you numb. It makes you wise. You no longer beg for attention. You no longer hope for change. You realize that holding on was costing you more than letting go ever will. The reason detachment is so hard isn't because you still want them. It's because a part of you is afraid of the space they leave behind. That space feels empty, unfamiliar, uncertain. But emptiness is not something to fear. It's a clean slate. It's room to rebuild. Room to remember who you are without their shadow looming over your heart. And in that space, something powerful begins to happen. You stop reacting. You stop chasing. You stop tying your identity to someone else's ability to love you. You start to understand that not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone earns the right to hold your heart. And just because someone made you feel something doesn't mean they're meant to stay in your life. Some connections are meant to teach, not to last. And when the lesson is over, your job is not to stay stuck in the memory. Your job is to graduate, to move forward, to stop rereading the same chapter just because you liked how it started. Detachment is the doorway to self-respect. It's the choice to stop bleeding for someone who won't even notice your wounds. It's the refusal to keep proving your worth to someone who is never looking. You are no longer trying to fit into their world. You are building your own, one where peace is not earned through suffering. One where your value is not defined by someone's ability to recognize it. One where you no longer lower your standards just to feel less alone. You've tried long enough. You've waited long enough. Now is the moment to let the past be the past. Not because you're angry, but because you're done. Done repeating the cycle. Done hoping they'll show up differently. Done betraying yourself for the sake of temporary comfort. This is your turning point. The moment you step out of the pattern and into your power, nothing changes until you do. But when you do, when you truly commit to your healing, your clarity, your peace, everything shifts. You stop reacting to what doesn't deserve a response. You stop needing closure from people who never gave you consistency. And you start creating a life that feels like freedom. You don't need their love to be whole. You just need your decision. The decision to rise, to release, and to return to yourself, fully, completely, and without apology. Detachment doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop allowing your feelings to control your choices. It means you no longer let the past pull you back into patterns that stole your peace. You stop allowing temporary emotions to create permanent suffering. You begin to rise above the craving for validation and see it for what it truly is, a distraction from the healing you've been postponing. Because as long as you're waiting for someone else to give you permission to move on, you're still tied to them in chains they no longer even notice. You don't need another apology. You don't need one more explanation, one more moment, one more chance to understand why they did what they did. What you need is your own permission to let the story end. You don't need to finish the conversation that broke you. You don't need to win the argument. You need peace more than you need closure. And peace doesn't come from them. It comes from the decision to no longer let them occupy space in your heart they never truly earned. Your healing begins when your standards rise. When you no longer accept emotional scraps just to feel loved. When you stop romanticizing potential and start honoring patterns. When you recognize that energy speaks louder than words and absence says more than any empty promise ever will. Emotional detachment isn't about bitterness, it's about clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about what you will no longer allow. Clarity about the fact that no matter how deeply you love them, you will no longer abandon yourself for the sake of someone else's confusion. You're not difficult to love, you're just not made for halfway affection. You're not meant to feel like an option. You're not built for guessing games. You need depth, you need truth, you need presence. And the moment you stop accepting less, you begin to attract more. Not from them, but from life, from yourself, from the future you've been too hurt to believe in. That future begins the moment you stop settling. You've given enough energy to what you hoped it would be. Now it's time to face what it actually is. Let the silence speak. Let the distance clarify. Let the disappointment teach. You don't grow by clinging. You grow by releasing. You become stronger every time you choose peace over chaos. Every time you walk away from what makes you feel small. Every time you silence the need to be needed. And remember, your worth is not measured by anyone's ability to recognize it. This is what detachment looks like. Not coldness, not numbness, but unwavering commitment to your own inner calm. Not bitterness, but boundaries. Not a closed heart, but one guarded with wisdom. You are not walking away because you stopped caring. You are walking away because you finally started caring about yourself. And that, more than anything, is the beginning of everything you deserve. There comes a point when your silence becomes more powerful than any words you could speak. When your absence says everything your presence tried so hard to explain. You reach a level of growth where you no longer argue for your worth, no longer chase understanding, no longer waste energy trying to fix something that was never whole to begin with. This is where emotional detachment becomes your freedom. Not because you stopped feeling, but because you started honoring those feelings enough to protect them. You can't keep giving chances to someone who sees your forgiveness as permission. You can't keep lowering your standards for the sake of history, habit, or hope. The past is not a reason to stay where your soul is starving. You were not created to beg for love, to prove your value, or to stay small just to keep someone else comfortable. That's not love. That's survival. And detachment means choosing to live again. You don't let go because the pain disappears. You let go because you're no longer willing to carry it. You detach when the weight of holding on becomes heavier than the fear of starting over. Because healing isn't about pretending it never hurt. It's about trusting that even the deepest wounds can become your greatest strength when you stop touching them and start letting them close. You've already endured what broke you. You've already cried for what could have been. You've already given pieces of yourself trying to hold something together that was never meant to last. And now, you're allowed to be done. You're allowed to stop explaining yourself. You're allowed to stop answering the calls, rereading the messages, replaying the memories. You're allowed to move forward without guilt. Detachment is not cruel. It's clarity. It's the moment you realize that your peace matters more than their presence. What you're feeling now, the emptiness, the discomfort, the grief, it's not a sign of weakness. It's proof that you're finally stepping into truth, that you're no longer willing to lie to yourself about what's real and what's not. You're beginning to see that your healing doesn't require their cooperation. It only requires your commitment to choosing peace over patterns, growth over cycles, self-respect over longing. You don't have to be angry. You don't have to wish them harm. You just have to stop handing over your power to someone who doesn't know what to do with it. Every time you let go, you create space. Space for clarity, space for strength, space for love that doesn't hurt to hold. You're not hard to love. You were just offering your heart to someone who couldn't hold it. And now, it's time to give that love back to the one who needs it most. You. This is not the end of something beautiful. This is the beginning of becoming whole. The peace you were searching for in them has always been waiting inside you. Now you finally have the strength to reach it. Peace feels unfamiliar when you've been surviving on chaos. When you've lived too long in emotional tension, silence feels like abandonment, calm feels like boredom, and love without confusion feels suspicious. But that's not truth speaking, that's trauma. That's the residue of being conditioned to see pain as proof of love. And now, as you step into detachment, you're not just letting go of a person. You're unlearning a pattern where your needs were ignored, where your feelings were invalidated, where your worth was tied to someone else's attention span. This is why detachment feels like withdrawal, because you're no longer feeding the addiction of being needed. You're no longer chasing highs that end in heartbreak. You're not soothing your insecurities with temporary comfort. You're choosing something deeper: stability, clarity, integrity. You're learning how to sit with yourself and not feel broken. You're learning that solitude isn't punishment, it's protection. And in that stillness, your nervous system starts to heal. Your heart begins to exhale. Your mind starts to find silence where there used to be noise. Emotional detachment isn't about building walls, it's about building discernment. It's about knowing who and what is worth your energy. It's about understanding that not every connection deserves access to your heart. You're no longer looking for someone to complete you. You're realizing you were never incomplete. You just forgot how powerful it feels to belong to yourself. And now, you're remembering every boundary you enforce, every message you ignore, every memory you release, every moment you say no instead of staying silent. It all adds up. These are the small daily decisions that lead to transformation. You don't heal by staying attached to what hurt you. You heal by proving to yourself that you're worthy of something different, something safe, something consistent, something that doesn't ask you to abandon your needs to feel loved. The version of you who tolerated chaos, they were doing their best, they just didn't know there was more. But now you do. Now you see the cost of staying emotionally tied to someone who was never emotionally available, and you're not willing to pay that price anymore. Letting go doesn't mean the connection was meaningless. It means you're choosing to stop losing yourself for it. You don't have to erase the past. You just have to stop trying to bring it back. Because the future you're building doesn't have room for people who treat your heart like an afterthought. The life you're stepping into requires space, space for peace, space for purpose, space for love that nourishes instead of drains. You're no longer asking for closure. You're creating it. With every breath, every choice, every step away from what doesn't serve you, you're creating it. And in that space, you're not just healing. You're becoming whole. Not because of them, but in spite of them. And more than that, because of you. You don't need another apology to move forward. You don't need their realization, their regret, or their recognition to rise. You've already waited long enough for something outside of you to bring peace inside of you. Now is the moment you stop waiting and start reclaiming. Because detachment is not cold, it's not indifference, it's not bitterness, it's wisdom. It's knowing the difference between connection and codependency, between love and control, between hope and self-deception. And when you start to know that difference, you begin to feel the weight lift, not all at once, but gradually, like your soul is finally remembering what it feels like to breathe without bracing for disappointment. It's not weakness to feel the ache, it's strength to feel it and still choose not to go back. There will be moments when your heart trembles with doubt, when your mind tries to convince you that the pain of letting go is worse than the pain of holding on. But those are echoes of old wounds, not truth. The truth is, every time you honor your boundaries, every time you stay silent instead of defending your worth, every time you stop yourself from reopening what already broke you, you're healing in real time. Healing doesn't always feel like a victory. Sometimes it feels like restraint. Sometimes it feels like emptiness. Sometimes it feels like choosing loneliness over disrespect. But it is victory. Quiet, powerful victory. The emotional grip loosens as you begin to see clearly. Not through the lens of longing, but through the clarity of growth. You remember the conversations where your needs were dismissed, the nights you stayed awake justifying their behavior, the moments you shrank yourself to avoid conflict. That wasn't love, that was survival. That was the part of you that didn't know you had a choice, but now you do. Now you see that what you settle for teaches others how to treat you. Now you know that no matter how deeply you care for someone, it should never come at the cost of abandoning yourself. Every time you choose peace over chaos, every time you protect your space instead of begging to be included, you build a life rooted in self-respect. Detachment means loving without losing, giving without draining, caring without collapsing. It means showing up for yourself with the same intensity you once showed up for them. Because the truth is, no one is coming to save you from the pain they caused. That's your job now, not because you deserve the pain, but because you deserve the healing. And healing begins when you stop tying your worth to how someone else treats you. You don't need closure, you need freedom. You need space to rediscover who you are without the weight of who you were with them. You need silence, not for their return, but for your own rebirth. And that's what detachment offers you. The power to walk away not in anger, but in truth. Not because you stopped loving them, but because you finally started loving you. Letting go does not mean you failed. It means you finally chose yourself. For too long, your value has been shaped by how much you can endure, how much you can give, how long you can wait. But that's not love. That's self-neglect dressed up as loyalty. And when you begin to detach, you realize the most powerful kind of love is the one you give yourself. Not because you're selfish, but because you're done pouring into places that leave you empty. You're done hoping someone else will see your worth when you've barely begun to feel it for yourself. Detachment is not about pushing people away. It's about pulling yourself back into alignment. The pain you feel is not a sign to turn back. It's proof that something inside you is breaking free from patterns that have kept you stuck. And yes, it hurts to release someone you once thought would be permanent. But holding on to them out of fear only delays the life that's meant for you. Detachment teaches you that it's okay to miss someone and still move on. That it's okay to care and still choose distance. That it's okay to feel deeply and still protect your peace. Emotions don't make you weak, they make you real. But it's your decisions that make you powerful. The truth is, people can only meet you at the depth they've met themselves. And you can't keep shrinking to stay accessible to someone who refuses to grow. You are not here to carry someone else's emotional weight. You are not here to fix what someone refuses to acknowledge. You are not responsible for teaching someone how to treat you. You are responsible for honoring what you already know you deserve. That's what detachment helps you reclaim. Your power to stop explaining, to stop defending, to stop justifying your pain for the sake of keeping peace with someone who only brings you chaos. Every time you choose stillness over reaction, you gain strength. Every time you take a step back, you gain clarity. Every time you walk away from what drains you, you make room for what restores you. Detachment isn't indifference, it's deep understanding. It's knowing that no matter how much you love someone, if they cost you your peace, your growth, your sense of self, they're too expensive. And you're done paying for it with your mental health. You're done settling for connections that leave you questioning your own worth. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And now, you're becoming the one who gives yourself everything you've ever needed. Validation, respect, presence, love. You're not waiting to be chosen. You've chosen yourself. That's what makes this powerful. Not because you didn't love them, but because you finally stopped loving them more than you loved your own well-being. And now, you're rising. Quietly. Strongly. Unapologetically. Because detachment didn't harden you, it awakened you. Emotional detachment isn't about building walls. It's about learning boundaries that protect your peace, not limit your love. You've spent enough time over-explaining yourself, bending just to keep others comfortable, suppressing your truth just to avoid confrontation. But when you detach, you reclaim the right to no longer sacrifice your emotional health for temporary acceptance. You no longer allow someone's inconsistency to rewrite the story of your self-worth. Detachment teaches you to observe without absorbing, to feel without losing yourself, and to care without collapsing. That's power. That's liberation. That's what it means to finally come home to yourself. You are no longer available for relationships built on confusion, manipulation, or emotional dependency. You are becoming unavailable to the things that once had access to your vulnerability and used it as a weakness. Now, you protect that space. You honor your energy. You understand that access to your heart is a privilege, not something to be handed over to anyone who simply asks for it. The more you detach from those who do not value you, the more you connect with the version of yourself that does. And that version of you is strong, clear, grounded, and ready to rise without permission. Letting go is hard because the mind clings to memories, to what-ifs, to potential. But you're not healing to get back to the past. You're healing to finally move forward. Emotional detachment is the process of no longer fighting for a seat at tables that never honored your voice. It's no longer hoping that someone will change when all they've shown is resistance to growth. It's realizing that you deserve depth, consistency, safety, not temporary highs followed by crushing lows. When you detach, you stop negotiating with your worth. You stop offering discounts to people who never plan to pay full price. This journey isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. You're not shutting down. You're waking up. You're starting to see that your value doesn't depend on how much you can tolerate. It lives in how fiercely you protect your peace. It lives in how deeply you choose yourself over and over again, especially when it's hard, especially when it hurts, especially when every part of you still craves what once broke you. That's growth. That's resilience. That's what emotional detachment creates. Not a numb heart, but a wise one. The most powerful shift is when you stop chasing closure from others and begin giving it to yourself. You don't need anyone to validate why it ended. You only need to acknowledge that staying was costing you the parts of yourself you're now ready to rebuild. So let the silence be your strength. Let the distance be your decision. Let the healing be your priority. Because you're not just letting go of them, you're finally holding on to you. And that choice will shape everything that comes next. Healing begins when you stop tying your worth to how much someone else needed you. You are not here to be someone's savior, someone's emotional anchor, or someone's reason to finally change. You are here to become whole within yourself. Emotional detachment is that moment of awakening when you realize you no longer need to fix what keeps breaking you. You stop pouring your time, energy, and soul into people who refuse to meet you halfway. You stop waiting for signs that they care, for gestures that never come, for apologies that stay locked inside silence. You rise, you detach, you decide that your life deserves more than waiting. Every time you choose yourself over chaos, you're rewriting the narrative of your future. Every boundary you set without guilt is an act of self-love. Every time you walk away without resentment, you reclaim your peace. That's not weakness, that's mastery. To detach is not to stop loving. It's to start loving yourself enough to let go. It's giving up the illusion that someone else's brokenness is your responsibility to carry. You are no longer their lifeline. You are your own healing. And from that space, you breathe deeper. You think clearer. You feel lighter. The truth is, people will only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. If someone avoids their pain, they'll never understand your growth. If they run from accountability, they'll reject your strength. If they only know love as control or chaos, they'll fear your freedom. That's why detachment matters. It protects you from shrinking to fit into spaces that never had room for your evolution. It shields your energy from those who drain it just to feel powerful. You are no longer staying where your presence is tolerated, but your absence would barely be noticed. There comes a point when silence speaks louder than words, when distance becomes your decision, not your punishment, when peace becomes more valuable than any emotional roller coaster. That point is power, and you are standing in it now. You're not cold, you're conscious. You're not bitter, you're bold. You're no longer handing over control of your inner world to someone who couldn't hold it with care. Emotional detachment is how you regain that control, not by becoming emotionless, but by becoming emotionally intelligent. It's the difference between reacting out of pain and responding with clarity. The moment you stop chasing what hurts you is the moment you create space for what heals you. You were never meant to lose yourself in the name of love. You were meant to expand, to rise, to be loved in return with the same depth and devotion you give so freely. Now you protect that gift. You no longer beg for crumbs when your soul deserves a feast. You walk away from confusion and into clarity. And from this place of power, you're not just surviving, you're transforming. Not for anyone else, but finally for you. You don't need to fight for love that doesn't fight for you. You don't need to keep proving your worth to someone who only sees you through the lens of their convenience. The moment you realize that love shouldn't cost you your peace, your joy, or your self-respect, something powerful begins to shift inside you. That shift is the beginning of detachment. It's the point where you stop begging for presents and start valuing your own. When you've been emotionally invested in someone who couldn't or wouldn't reciprocate, detachment becomes not only healing, it becomes necessary. You start to understand that your emotional energy is sacred. Not everyone deserves access to it. You've spent too long overextending, trying to explain your heart to someone who couldn't hear it. Now it's time to turn that energy inward, to stop wondering if they'll ever change, and instead, ask yourself why you kept waiting. It's not blame, it's awareness. And with awareness comes freedom. You learn that it's okay to let go, even if part of you still wants to hold on. Because holding on to what's hurting you doesn't mean you're strong. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is release it with love and walk away. You weren't meant to spend your life convincing someone of your value. You were meant to be seen, heard, cherished without having to earn it through pain. Emotional detachment is the act of honoring that truth. It's not apathy, it's alignment. You no longer attach your identity to how others treat you. You no longer define your worth by someone else's ability to love you well. That's how you reclaim your power. That's how you start living from a place of wholeness instead of desperation. Your heart becomes your home again, not a battlefield. When you detach, you start seeing things for what they are, not what you wish they could be. You stop falling in love with potential and start respecting reality. You stop making excuses for mistreatment because you're finally making room for respect. And respect starts with you, with what you tolerate, with what you accept, with what you're willing to walk away from, even if it breaks your heart. Because you've learned that a broken heart can still beat with strength. It can still heal. And it does, when you stop reopening wounds that were never meant to stay open. There is something profoundly powerful in knowing you no longer need someone to validate your emotions, your worth, or your existence. That's what emotional detachment gives you. It restores the parts of you that you gave away without question. It allows you to sit with silence and not fear it, to feel loneliness without collapsing under it, to choose peace over drama, to choose yourself not as a last resort, but as the only way forward. You are not empty without them. You are full of everything you've been searching for in someone else. Now it's time to see that clearly and claim it fully. When you finally choose yourself, the world doesn't collapse, it opens. It doesn't punish you for letting go of what hurt you. It rewards you with clarity, strength, and peace. The fear that once kept you tethered to dysfunction begins to fade, and in its place, a deep knowing rises. A knowing that you are never too much, never too broken, never too hard to love. You are simply trying to bloom in a place that never offered sunlight, and now, you no longer wait for someone else to water your soul. You do it yourself. This is the rebirth. The moment you stop hoping someone will come back and start realizing what's been missing is not their love, it's your own. You start to build your life not around someone else's absence, but around your presence. And that shift is seismic, because when you return to yourself, you become unshakable. You stop chasing closure from people who never had the capacity to give it. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. You close the door yourself, not out of anger, but out of necessity. Because peace isn't something you beg for, it's something you protect. You begin to trust your silence. You understand that stillness isn't emptiness, it's space. Space to heal, space to grow, space to breathe without guilt, without shame, without the heaviness of someone else's chaos resting on your shoulders. You see that walking away isn't a failure, it's wisdom. It's the realization that self-betrayal is far more painful than being alone, because the most brutal thing you can do to your spirit is keep betraying it just to feel loved. And now, you refuse to shrink to fit into places that dishonor who you are becoming. With every step forward you break another chain. The need to be needed. The addiction to approval. The belief that love must be earned through suffering. You begin to rewrite the story. You no longer crave love that burns. You seek love that builds. You're no longer impressed by attention that is inconsistent or affection that's conditional. You want presence, you want depth, and most importantly, you want truth. Because you've lied to yourself enough times just to keep someone close. But closeness without care is still abandonment, and now you choose better. There is no need to explain your evolution to those who refuse to grow with you. Healing is not a group project. Sometimes, the most courageous thing you can do is rise quietly, rebuild privately, and glow unapologetically. You are not bitter. You are not cold. You are no longer available for cycles that drained your joy. You are grounded now, not in fantasy but in truth. Not in desperation, but in dignity. You are finally beginning to feel what it means to be whole without someone else completing you. That is your power. That is your liberation, and no one can take that from you again. Healing does not ask for permission. It arrives when you are ready to stop romanticizing pain and start honoring peace. You reach a point where survival is no longer enough. You crave alignment. You crave internal harmony so deeply that chaos starts to feel foreign. You no longer cling to old wounds just because they're familiar. You no longer carry people who kept you drowning while pretending to be your lifeline. You release the illusion that suffering is noble and begin to realize that peace is the most radical act of self-respect you can offer yourself. The patterns you once repeated now feel like cages. You see them clearly. The need to prove your worth, the compulsion to fix others while abandoning yourself. The cycle of shrinking in exchange for crumbs of validation. It all becomes unbearable because your soul is evolving, and what once numbed the pain no longer silences the truth. You stop running, you stop avoiding, you stop blaming, not because it's easy, but because you're finally strong enough to face yourself with compassion. You're no longer interested in being seen, you're determined to see yourself. There is a quiet strength in detaching from what drains you. You start to notice how much lighter you feel when you stop explaining your boundaries and simply enforce them. You realize that not everyone deserves access to you just because they remember a version of you that no longer exists. Growth demands distance, not out of bitterness, but out of self-protection. Because healing isn't just about moving on, it's about no longer feeling pulled backward. It's about becoming so rooted in your truth that manipulation no longer confuses you, and guilt no longer controls you. You begin to trust your own energy. You notice what expands you and what contracts you. You pay attention to how your body responds when you enter a room, hear a name, or revisit a thought. You stop overriding your instincts to make others comfortable. You stop dimming your voice to keep the peace, because that kind of peace is just silent suffering, and you refuse to live that lie anymore. You are no longer addicted to potential. You are devoted to reality, to what is present, to what reciprocates, to what nourishes instead of depletes. The version of you that tolerated disrespect under the name of love no longer leads. The version of you that overextended to be chosen no longer speaks for your worth. You are no longer willing to carry guilt for choosing yourself. You are no longer waiting for someone to finally value you the way you always should have valued yourself. This is not pride. This is self-recognition. You have earned the right to protect your energy, to walk away without drama, to rebuild in silence, and to rise in your own timing. This is your season of reclamation, and this time, nothing within you is willing to settle, because now, you know exactly who you are, and more importantly, who you are not. You stop waiting for permission to become who you were meant to be. You no longer shrink to fit the comfort zones of others who fear your transformation. You stop apologizing for your evolution, because you realize you've paid the price in silence for far too long. You've been quiet in rooms that deserved your truth. You've been patient in places that offered no growth. You've begged for love from people who only knew how to take. And now, you rise not because you've reached perfection, but because you finally understand that healing is not about being unbreakable, it's about becoming whole. You begin to recognize the difference between being liked and being respected. The masks you once wore to gain acceptance now feel suffocating. You remove them one by one, knowing that your authenticity is not a risk, it's a revolution. You stop molding yourself into versions that please the world, and start standing in the version that pleases your soul. You no longer seek validation from people who never understood your worth. You no longer crave closure from those who fed on your confusion. What you seek now is clarity, and what you protect now is peace. And that peace is sacred. You stop performing strength and begin embodying it. You let go of the belief that you must always be unshaken to be powerful. Real power lives in your willingness to feel deeply, to hurt honestly, and to rise gently. You become the space where your own wounds are held without judgment. You become the sanctuary you always needed, and from that place you rebuild, not in haste, not to prove anything, but because you've tasted what it means to be disconnected from yourself, and you refuse to live in that void ever again. The noise around you no longer dictates your path. You don't move just to be seen. You don't speak just to be heard. You act from alignment, not urgency. You listen more to your inner compass than to the chaos of the crowd. And that quiet obedience to your truth becomes your loudest statement. You are no longer afraid of being misunderstood, because you are finally understood by the one voice that matters most, your own. You don't beg to belong. You build where you are valued. You don't run from solitude. You honor it as the soil where your roots grow deeper. You realize that the path ahead doesn't require you to be perfect. It only requires you to be present. Present with your truth. Present with your growth. Present with the part of you that is still learning, still trying, still becoming. And in that presence you discover something unshakable. You don't need to have all the answers to be powerful. You just need to stop abandoning yourself. Every time you choose yourself without guilt, without delay, without hesitation, you rewrite your future. And with every choice aligned to your truth, you become unstoppable.